Welcome to Foxfire Focus, the podcast that brings clarity and insight to the industry's most relevant issues. Foxfire's mission is to provide the best service experience in eye care. So, we hope you enjoy what you're about to hear and that this information provides some perspective on the exciting opportunities facing our profession. For more information about Foxfire, please visit us at foxfiresg.com. Foxfire, taking care of your practice so you can manage your patients.
Hello and welcome to Eyes on Eye Care, a podcast about the business and the world of eye care. I'm back with my friend Jim Marburg, and we wanted to come back and talk about a special topic. Jim, because of his experience and education, I think you probably educated more than half the optometrists in the state, and because of his work with the Vision America Referral Center, which has really touched the lives of almost all the optometrists in the state, knows so many people in so many different places that you have been a go-to guy when there's a problem. The kind of problem that happens too often where there's been disability or even death in a practice, and there wasn't a plan for transition. So today we're going to be talking about your optometric will. What do you do, or how do you prepare for an unwanted transition in your practice? So Jim, welcome.
Thank you, Tim.
So I've already introduced the topic, and it's kind of a dark, heavy topic.
It is.
But tell me why or how you got involved in this in the first place.
Well, it was, as you said, because of my exposure to so many of the ODs in Alabama through UAB and then through our optometric networking company, that I just got to know a lot of them personally. And I think we'd each like to think of ourselves as somebody who is considered trustworthy. And apparently there was enough folks out there that felt like they at least wanted some of my opinion to some degree, and I would get calls. You were right on when you said it's a dark topic and it's a heavy topic. It can be almost overly emotional at times when you stop and start thinking about students you had much younger than you who are no longer here.
Yeah.
And you had to help their families. Or golf buddies.
Oh, right.
That
Friends.
are no longer here.
Right.
That were optometrists. And so what has going through that a number of times, and if not going through it, being adjacent to it and knowing about it. How many times do you have to be hit before you say, I'm going to do something about it? So my banner has been for quite some time, almost to a point of being rude to some folks when I felt like they please listen to me, is that to tell them, be prepared.
Yeah.
Plan. Don't let this catch you off guard. It could happen to you. You and I have a dear friend, no names will be mentioned here, that's about our age, that was going to sail off into retirement because one of his children was already in the practice and taking it. And now that child is hoping to get a heart transplant. And now dad's back into trying to run the practice. And as he has said, I'm almost too old for this. But now he's got these two sets of strains, both getting back into the practice mode, doing this, and yet trying to help take care of one of his children. It's just a tremendously emotional task and draining. So to the folks that are going to be listening to this, I just say this. You can always think it'll never happen to me. You can always think that's not me because I'm in good health. I'm in this, I'm in that. Well, you're looking at somebody that had an unplanned heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
And cardiologist said I was in great health.
Yeah.
About 4 months before I had a heart attack.
Yeah.
So the key message here I'd like to get across, Tim, is that assume it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a plan, then assume you are not prepared. The biggest alarm to me is when I talk with an OD, or actually any business person, and I'm talking to a dentist now, because it's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. My dentist had it happen to him. The practice closed.
Wow.
They couldn't find anything.
Yeah.
Building went empty. So to the individual business person, let's talk optometry today. If you don't have an absolute exit and transition plan in place, think something's going to happen in the next few weeks and get going on it. You say, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. Well, part of that's what we talk about today. But there are other things that other people, processes that can help you get from where you are to where you need to be. But unless you act, it's not going to happen. And this is my fanny kicking moment. I just say, please listen, please do something about it. Because once you get there, it will bring you some relief. But most importantly, I want you to do it out of respect for your family. Because the last thing you want to do is put your family through the stress of dealing with an asset that was the family's, it was yours. Mm-hmm. Dealing with that and dealing with either your significant disability and or death. Because that has been the most stressful and trying times I've pretty much had in my profession, dealing with that.
Yeah, so talk to me. Let's say I'm 50 years old. My oldest kid has started college. I maybe have one more in high school. Things are going great. The practice is booming. Everything's good. Yeah, I've got life insurance. And I maybe even have disability insurance. So this is way in the back of my mind. What do you think I need to be doing to have an optometric will?
Well, let's consider, I want to say, two avenues. One, you don't have a replacement in the chute, which means you don't have a child that's going to move in and take over, or a relative. You don't have a guaranteed, they're not here yet. You don't even have that lined up yet. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the typical, I'm going to say, optometric or business practice. You're the lone horse. You have dear friends in the area. You have colleagues that are around the state. You talk to them all the time. First of all, I'd start talking with them and just saying, what is anybody else doing about this? Mm-hmm. You don't have to create the wheel. Find out when you go to meetings and all that, just, hey, is anybody else worried about does anybody here have a transition plan or anything? Find out what they've done. They may tell you, hey, this is great, or they may say, I tried it, don't like it. But start the process of finding out, how can I set up a transition plan? What's actually involved in that? Some folks will say, well, look, I've only got a one doctor practice, maybe a 1.1 or a 1.2. What am I supposed to do? Just keep somebody driving around the block until I'm ready to go? How can I handle that? There are multitudes of things that can be done. There are young doctors that are willing to work 2 and 3 different offices. What if you've got 3 colleagues all in the same boat, mm-hmm. and they're all within 20, 30 miles or something? Y'all could get together and say, look, let's all carve out a day, mm-hmm. maybe a day and a half, mm-hmm. and let's get one person to come in and we'll hire them.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll each want to have an agreement with this person. Hopefully it'll never happen to us. But if it does, we've kept one person busy, had a lot of great experience. And if something happens, we can do that. That's doable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's doable through buy-sell contracts that are funded by insurance.
Yeah.
And that's really what I think is probably the most popular way to go with term insurance. And I'm not an insurance agent, and I'm certainly not an attorney. But you would talk to insurance agents, they'll tell you how to do that, and an attorney would help you set that up. Such that if something would happen to you or any one of that group, the young person then would do that. Now, it could be written to where one of the other main doctors has the first right of refusal on the practice. Or it might just be to that young person. That's just one example. And it doesn't even have to be that group doctors. It could be you are the only one, but that young doctor is off working maybe in corporate settings or some other kind of, maybe in academic institutions.
Mm-hmm.
Could be a number of things. Excuse me. So finding somebody that you can have come in and get familiar with the patients, get familiar with your EMR system, all of that. That's one of the best ways to do it. And there's a number of examples here in this state how that's worked.
Yeah. I think one of the things that happens, though, with a lot of optometrists is, particularly in the middle years of their life, they get so busy with their practice and they're very busy with their family that they don't really have time to invest in other friendships, particularly with other optometrists. They don't think they have time to go to society meetings or zone meetings or state meetings. And some of those relationships that you talked about are so important to have friends who are in your profession who you can share ideas with, bounce ideas back and forth with, and more importantly, will have your back in an emergency. Those are very important.
Yes, sir.
Now, you mentioned, all right, let's say, now I'm not that 50-year-old guy. Let's say I'm 55. And now my kid has finished college and he's decided he wants to be an optometrist, or maybe I've found that young person and they're on partner track or they're on coming into the practice track. I've got somebody lined up. What do I do now?
Well, I would still say sit down and come up with a true transitional business plan. First thing I would do is I'd sit down with an attorney and say, okay, look, I want to have it how this should look on paper. Mm-hmm. Because any number of people, you can still plan it's going to be a child. It can still be that. How do you know they're not going to get there? Particularly, well, young kids come to optometry school usually single, typically. Mm-hmm. And if they find Mr. or Mrs. Right while they're at school, one of them's going to say, this is where we're going to go. If it's your child, but they don't hold necessarily the upper hand, you just lost.
Yeah.
Now you got to start from scratch. So,
I've seen that happen many times, haven't you? Yeah.
So I guess I'd use the old Zig Ziglar line, start with the end in mind. I want to transition, and I want this person to come in, and this is how I want it to be handled.
Yeah.
And then back toward the front. Treat it like a funnel. You know what you want to have happen at the bottom of the funnel. Now climb back up the funnel, and at the top of the funnel are options, opportunities for different people. Where are you going to get those from? Yeah. And that's really part of and it's not a secret, that's just really part of the solution. And that is it a younger doctor who's local? Is it a younger doctor who's 40 miles away or 50 miles away that is looking to grow the footprint and expand? Mm-hmm. And they really only have a part-time practice. You got pretty much a full-time, but they could manage it. The last couple of, I would say, ventures I helped with were in outside of Alabama. And it was basically younger doctors who bought slower practices from older doctors. And they said, now I can handle this and I can handle more. So we went out and found them others to, now they're up to almost a full-time practice, 2 locations. Now these young doctors are looking for their classmates who wants to come join me. And now they're growing their footprint, both people-wise and foot-wise. So that's one of the days to do it. But excuse me again. But again, if you can sort of imagine the funnel and start with the end in mind, what's going to come out at the end, and go back up, then it will help you define what you want, where you have to go for some of that. But for sure, an accountant, an attorney, your colleagues, ask for them. But one of the other things is sources of doctors. Let's talk for, if it's okay, let's just talk for a second of an emergency. We all had to shut down for a while for COVID. So we know what it's like just to close the doors for a while. What if you had another kind of health issue where you're going to be out for 2 to 3 months? What are you going to do? Sorry, I'm fighting allergies.
Take a sip there if you need to.
Okay, good.
Go ahead.
Will you be able to cut that?
Oh, they may or they may not. Who knows? But we'll see. Yeah, when you've got that kind of emergency, what do you do when you need a locum tenens? Where do you find those?
Well, there are companies for local tenens. There are professional companies out there where you can hire. A lot of MDs do that. Could you hire an MD to come to your office and do that? I don't know. State law, probably, possibly could. But are there ODs? I think there are. But your state association typically has a list of ODs who are looking for part-time employment. I know we do here in Alabama. So there are ways, and some are willing to travel for a period of time. What if you're going to be laid out for a month for rehab after falling and breaking your hip or something like that? There are solutions. You yourself are helping out some folks.
Now, I'm in a great position to be able to do that, to help a friend who's got to have some help right now.
And we've all done that at some point.
Yes.
And that's good. And those are part of the solutions.
Yeah. Those kind of relationships that you build within the profession with your classmates and your friends and so forth, I can't stress how important they are. And Jim, I did not realize when I was in my 30s or 40s or even 50s how important friendships like that were on a number of levels. But maybe it's just a part of getting gray hair and arthritis that you also realize how important your friends are.
And hearing, what'd you say?
Yes. We recognize that now. And this is a good example. I'm able to go to the aid of a friend because he's having to come back into a practice while his child is sick and he's having to worry about the practice and worry about his child. And so being able to step in at a time like that's a real privilege.
Oh. Yeah. And you're a blessing to those people.
Well,
but it is stressful. And if the folks out there who haven't planned anything could just imagine putting their family through that, I think that would sort of move them to the next level and say, maybe I should start looking. Maybe I better find a solution.
You told me a story of a situation where you were called to the hospital. You were literally in the hospital helping a man sign papers, an optometrist to sign the papers that would allow his practice to be transitioned. Tell a little bit about that story.
A golf friend that I worked on for a number of years to get to that point. A champion procrastinator. And he kept, I think, feeling like he was just one step ahead of what might happen. And then he ran out of steps. And then I got the call. Had very little time. And went to the hospital to get him to sign the papers with great effort. and he passed the next day. I still have difficulty with that because I felt like, what could I have done better? I didn't do something right. Maybe I should have yelled at him more. Maybe I should have done something, because it was extremely stressful for the whole family.
Yeah,
extremely stressful. And the issues that pertain to that also, by the way, are estate issues. What happens if there's multiple children? In the case when you're talking about a child's coming in, well, what if a child agrees and there's even a buy-sell agreement and everything looks good? What happens if the owner dies before the entire practice is paid off? How is the difference in the price and what's owed handled between the siblings? One of the siblings is buying it, but the others maybe are not. Therefore, so it's very complex. And I think the last thing anybody wants to do is to put their family, their children, their spouse through a situation where business causes problems within the family that can be significant.
Absolutely.
If not severe.
Absolutely. And you have to consider so many things: the value of the practice, the value of the real estate, which would be valued separately from the value of the practice in most cases. How long do you keep the real estate? If there's still an outstanding note, we talked about that earlier. In the event of even in a position where, let's say, the doctor's financing part of the practice, as long as there's an outstanding note, what if there's a default?
Yeah.
And the real estate no longer is under the doctor's control. What happens then? He has to take possession of the practice, but he doesn't have a place to practice. They're
complex.
They're complex things.
Complex.
That really, as you said, need a whole list of advisors, not just something that you can sit down one night and think about and have settled.
You do need a team, and you got to trust them. And you've got to be in charge. You don't walk in and be meek about it and say, look, guys, I'm paying you. You're on my team. This is what I want. This is the end of my funnel. And I keep coming back to that as an analogy, because I think if you have some kind of mental image that you can get across to somebody, I've used the funnel in many respects on either how to grow a business, how to transition a business. It's really, that's why you do have to have that great set of advisors out there that you meet with. You don't just do it once. It's a constant update. How are things going? Does this need to be altered in any way?
Does this optometric will change at different points in your practice? For example, I think you told me of a situation of a young man had not been in practice long, developed a brain tumor, and passed away within a relatively short period of time. What were you able to do with his practice versus, let's say, someone that had been in practice for 40 years?
Well, in that case, there wasn't a lot of practice because it was new, fairly new. Could sell the equipment, because this is one of the ones where it didn't really, it didn't present the picture of somebody wants to come in and buy this and take it over and run it. It wasn't in a good time of year because there were no brand new graduates. The time all of this happened, it just wasn't right for that group of people. The other folks that were within reason, and it's very highly populated town with optometrists and with patients, is that, no, I've already got what I need. I don't need that. I don't need what that presents. So this is one of the unique cases where in an urban setting, which is quite often what we have to do in extreme rural settings, and that is sell the pieces.
Yeah.
You sell the EMR if you can, if somebody wants it. You sell the optical. You sell the equipment. You sell easier to do in urban, sell the patient charts. And then just do the best you actually can from that standpoint. I always tell the folks, and that one of the things you want to be careful of is particularly if it's disability, if you're disabled and you can't find, you don't want to ever come across being exposed for abandonment of care. Even though you would think any reasonable person will say, well, doctor, you've been injured, you can't do this, you can't do that. You don't want that exposure. And it's your responsibility to transfer the care. Inform the patients that you will no longer seeing them, or you can't see them, or your practice is going to be delayed. You've got to keep up that communication.
Yeah.
Who in the family can do that for you? Or what do you have laid out for them? Who are you going to send them to handle that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Rural practices present even a more unique approach, and that is because there typically isn't colleague right around the corner. That's why it's a rural practice. The next closest one might be 10 or 15 miles. And it's interesting, though. I think a lot of states, Alabama is one of these, has identified the fact that rural health care is becoming a challenge because a lot of folks go to school, go to med schools, they like towns, they end up want to staying in that town or a town like that,
right.
And they do not want to return to the rural area. The desire to be out in the country and away from it just doesn't hit many people. State Alabama is now encouraging the scholarship board to give significant amounts of money to students who will go to rural areas and maintain a practice there, and in essence, over a period of time, forgive that amount of money. It would be a loan,
right?
Not a scholarship. It's a loan. As long as they work there, then it's forgiven. If I had a rural optometric practice right now, I'd be finding out about that because you may have a buyer that would love to come to your town, take over that practice, and also have a significant amount of money in the process,
right,
from the state for them to stay there.
Right. Maybe sitting in that first or second year optometry school class is the answer to your problems, who would be able to get out of school with forgivable debt if they will simply commit to being
absolutely
practice.
And that's just started, by the way.
Oh, that's wonderful. And that overcomes one of the big barriers to new graduates saying, well, I can't afford to practice because I've got all of the school debt. And I just, that's too much debt. I can't afford that. I need to go work corporate or go work somewhere else.
Yes. And this is the way it's being designed is it can be available to seniors that already have debt that will help them pay down their current debt.
Yeah. Now, you and I are familiar with a model that was kind of unique, and it happened in a town not too far from us, where there was a retiring doctor, or I can't remember if he retired or if there was a disability or a death that took place that kind of precipitated the whole thing. But 3 different individual doctors went together, formed a corporation, and bought a practice to keep it alive.
Yes, that did happen, and it worked for 20-something years.
Wow.
Until they started looking at retirement. And then, well, we now have this product. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
And so they ended up going through pretty much the same process. I think that one it eventually went to the bits and pieces route, but it provided them with exactly what they wanted, for the 3 of them. So it's a good example of how creative you can be, and not only maintain a patient base, but also achieve some of your own other goals that you'd like.
Now, we talked about this, I think, in an earlier podcast about partnerships, but in a partnership situation like that, what's the secret sauce that's going to make it work? When you've got 3 different individuals who have their own practices, and they already have their own patient bases coming together to take over an existing practice, what would make that work? What would be some of the barriers, you might say, as well?
And you don't even have to say a business. You can just say it's a marriage. What makes a marriage work successfully? Trust, accountability, loyalty, honesty, all of that. If that's there, and as the saying goes, you must not only be honest, but you must give the appearance of being honest. If you have that there, it will be successful.
All right.
If you're that way. If you're not afraid to say, I know we're tired of meeting, but we got to go through the books. I want everybody to see the books. I want everybody to look at the money coming in and the money going out. And I want everybody to approve. Mm-hmm. If you have that, it'll work. If you end up where one of 2 people or one of 3 people or one of 5 people says, y'all don't worry about it, I'll take care of it. And 4, 5, 6 months later, not everybody's seen the books, not everybody understands what happened, then it starts to raise a question. But that's true in any relationship, any partnership. You have to give a unified front to not only to all the partners. So you can't have 2 partners presenting a unified front to one. The 3 or 4 or 5, they all have to be unified and say, while we may not all agree, we agree this is what we're going to do and how we're going to act. Then there can be success. If that breaks down in the long run, the chances are there's probably going to be problems somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
If a wife has to wonder how come the husband's not home 2 hours or 3 hours after it's supposed to be home,
right?
Something happens.
Trouble.
Yeah. So
let's wrap this up. So put on your big boots and let's kick them into action. So if I'm a young doctor, if I'm a middle-aged doctor, if I'm an older doctor, what do I need to do about my optometric will?
Assume something bad's going to happen in a month. What do you have to do to be ready in a month? You can say, I don't own anything. I'm just a student. That's fine. What kind of debts do you have? Do you have a fiance that might want to know what she's marrying into or he's marrying into? Have all of that. Make your financial status an awareness with the important other people in your life. Don't be embarrassed if you're, in debt. Mm-hmm. That happens to everybody, I mean, you remember I started my practice when interest rates were 22.5% interest. I wasn't happy with how any of my financials looked at 22.5% interest.
Yeah.
But have it understood. And if you're in the middle range or in the beginning, let's say you've been in practice 10 years. Sit down with the wife, and then if need be, other appropriate people, including parents, particularly if you owe the parents any money, and just say, folks, I'm going to come up with a business plan. I got a funnel here. All right, here it is. And out of the bottom is going to come a transition plan. So if anything happens to me, you don't have to worry. Mm-hmm. It's going to be all planned out. But I want everybody to know what it is.
So that's a personal financial statement.
Yes.
A list of your assets, which are equipment, and so forth. Have you ever known of cases where someone maybe had a fire or a flood in their office and they lost equipment, and the insurers wanted to know, what did you have? How much did you pay for it? When did you get it? What's the replacement value? And you stand there scratching your head trying to say, oh my goodness, I can't remember. Let's see if I can visually walk through the rooms and try to remember what was in there and pull out all the drawers.
It's interesting you say that. When I help doctors evaluate their practice, I know the biggest pushback I get from them is when I say I want you to walk in the front door, and I want you to videotape every room, and then I want you to sit down and write down everything you see, and you pull out the drawers, do all of that, and make an absolute complete inventory. It'll be about 7-8 pages on an Excel spreadsheet. I don't want to do that. That's what you have to do. Mm-hmm. And by the way, you'll love me for it later, because you will for your insurance, and it'll be easier to keep up to date. And then when you're through with that, go back and do the same thing in the optical. Mm-hmm. Every frame you have it, all that. Well, my computer produces it. Do you have it printed out? Yeah. Where is it saved? Is it saved in the cloud? But if you get that, that's the hardest part of evaluating a practice, mm-hmm. which is still what they need to do. Yeah. So I get some kickback on that. But then at the same time, when they go up to the next level and they start talking with attorneys mm-hmm. and business plan on transition and start getting insurance, everybody in the family needs to know, by the way, my business partner and I, we're setting up a buy-sell agreement, and we're going to fund it with insurance. And once it's all done, I'm going to explain it to you all, just in case something happens, you'll know how things are going to go. Yeah. Because, again, until you are around some family that's dealing with the grief of losing their loved one, who happens to be a doctor, and then it hits them on the, oh my gosh, look what we have to deal with. Mm-hmm. You don't want to do that to a family. So let that fear of that happening hopefully drive you to completing the task. You'll be much happier with yourself if you do that.
Perhaps it'd be a good thing to put on our calendars that on November or January the 1st every year, that part of my celebration is that, and we all do this, we all look back at the previous year, we project for the future year. Part of that process should be, is my financial statement up to date? Is my equipment inventory up to date? Is my plan up to date?
Yeah, absolutely. What did I buy? Mm-hmm. What did I sell? And they won't be sorry they did it.
Absolutely. Jim, thank you so much. Your experience and your wisdom in all of this is, I wish and more people could take advantage of it. I'm privileged to be called one of your friends. You've helped me a lot over the years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I apologize for my early coughing, my allergies.
That's all right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for all you do.
You're welcome.